Hey everyone, welcome to the Family Business Podcast. My name is Dominique Sampson.
And my name is Malobi Sampson II.
And on this podcast, we're going to talk about everything from relationships, careers, God, therapy. Listen, we are talking about it all.
So sit back, relax, and let us take you on the adventure of a lifetime. Hello, people. How are you guys doing? Welcome back to another installment of our podcast. Thank you guys for joining us so far. We really enjoy having you guys here with us.
As you know, we are a family of 3.
Growing.
So you may hear,
A grown family.
Oh,
like, we're just a family that's growing, and we got a young one in the background.
I'm just like...
We don't babysit him out. We just have him sit in with us.
Exactly. So he's here with us. You may hear him from time to time. And hey, it is what it is at this point. Exactly. So let's talk about, Wakanda Forever just came out on Disney Plus. And so it was already out in the movie theaters, but it just came out on Disney Plus, so everybody can watch it if you didn't check it out in the movie theaters. So I know as a family, we sat down to watch it, and we really, really enjoyed watching it. So what do you think about it? What did you think about it?
What did I think about? Okay, well, I thought...
What did you think about it?
I thought it was a really good movie. I know I'll speak for myself first before I speak on the opinions of others. There was a few reasons why I liked it.
Right.
One of the reasons, I'm a fan of Ryan Coogler. I think he's doing an excellent job. My personal dream one day is to work with him and be able to either collab, be a camera person, be someone to give advice, give him his iPad when he asks for, or something, just really connect or work with him in some capacity. So I liked it for that. I also liked it because he did a really good job. Okay, so before I can jump right into that, I have to jump to another film.
Okay.
Zack Snyder, who's another director, white director. Doesn't matter what his race is, but he's an awesome director, cinematographer, collaboration. That's what I would like to be, someone who directs and every now and again gets behind the camera and is actually on the camera and working it out. And so he did the film Justice League. And when he did the Justice League film, man, that film was super long. If you remember, it was about 4 hours long. And they had segments. So they had like the Superman segment. They had the Cyborg segment, the Batman segment, and then you had the Wonder Woman segment. And recently, I know that there's been a huge conversation amongst some that, they're pushing this woman everywhere and downplaying on the man and stuff. But the parts that they're giving to some of these women are done very, very well. So I wanted to jump to Zack Snyder really quick, because when they do the scene in the beginning, within I think the first 15 minutes of the Justice League film, there's a scene where the women are inside and they're protecting this box. And the enemy comes in to try to steal this box. I'm forgetting the bad guy's name right now, but the main bad guy's in there to steal it. And then she's like, I think the woman yelled at her, like, show us your fear or something. Show us how we respond to this moment. And it's like, we have no fear. And all the women yell this. And it was like, man, it gave you chills in that moment.
Oh, wow.
And so I also liked the opening scene in this film and how they had the woman protecting the lab. And so these French mercenaries or these French army comes in and they try to steal some vibranium because they think it's at this lab. They get in and the Wakanda woman kicked their butt. And then they come into the UN. She makes them sit down in her language. And then essentially it's like, this was our polite way of handling this. Yeah. If you continue to push us, you will handle this in a much more egregious way. And so they wrote that so well, and it gives you chills to see like powerful women in that role. And so in my life, there's a lot of powerful women, and someone very wise once said, just because you have women rising up doesn't mean that men have to be weak. It just means that the men are as strong or stronger because they're able to work together with these strong women. Right. And so for me, I there's so many other reasons why I liked it. Right. I loved how this is a spoiler alert, by the way. So if you haven't seen it, please go and see it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. But they ended it so well. I'm going to jump to the end. They did so well because they showed T'Challa's son, who's also named T'Challa. So they're setting up to bring men back. So even if you feel like, dang, we lost out on all the men, what are they doing with all the men? They're bringing them back. And his son speaks Haitian fluently. So he's going to be a strong global leader.
Is Haitian a language?
No, it's French. They speak French in Haiti. I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me on that. And they also speak a local language. Which, it's not patois, but it's something. And so it's cool to see that. And side note, if Chadwick had lived and they wrote his story in, they were going to write his story in a way in which him and Nakia break it off. Nakia break it off. And so when they break it off, she was going to be a single mother, or she was going to be a mother with another man.
Oh, okay. So and like have a stepfather.
Have a stepfather figure for the son. And she doesn't tell the stepfather that it's not his son. So then you have this other weird thing going on. Yeah. And then Chadwick would have come in, or Black Panther T'Challa would have come in, found out it was his son, and they go on a mission. And in going on the mission, he discovers it's his son, and then they also takes his son on like a father-son adventure or whatever.
Oh, wow.
But I would have not preferred that kind of story, just because I'm like, dang, so you mean to tell me like you're going to continue to... So it's either that you project women strongly, or that like the men are questionable in the household, and so then you have like these group of families raising people.
So you're really happy with how then Ryan Coogler told the story.
Yeah, it was a better pivot. I think it was a nice pivot, especially with like such short notice, right? Because the deadline for these films were still supposed to come out. And some films they delay, and I know the feedback from some people was, oh, they should have just recast them. They recast other
That wouldn't have been
people.
Good, though, if they recasted them. He did such a good job.
He did. I don't know who could have played him. There are a lot of people who probably could have filled in and done it differently, but I don't know who could have replaced him. What were you saying? You were jumping in. Sorry. This is film stuff, so I'm like, so excited. I'm hype. I'm in this thing.
But I don't think they should have recast him, though, honestly.
Why not?
I don't think anybody could have played his part as well as him. And then it would have been awkward to, like, we know he passed away in real life, so it's like it's awkward to see him know that he passed away and experience this thing and in the film not acknowledge that at all. That would have been awkward.
Yeah.
For me, even Fast and Furious, when they did that,
Paul Walker.
Yeah, I didn't know his name, but I just remember the song because it was such a moving song. It made you cry when you heard it. It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. That was such a good song. I was like, very good song. I didn't even know anybody
Wiz
that
Khalifa
died.
And
but
Sam
it was
Smith
so
did a really good job
sad.
with that. Yeah, it was.
So when he died, they didn't recast him.
They did.
Well, his brother, but his brother is his. So I think it borders a line because his brother is his twin, identical twin.
Yes.
So when they recast him, it was almost like you didn't like if Chadwick had an identical twin. Okay, that might have made sense. But you're gonna give this whole like other person a thing that's not even cool. But because it was his brother, it was like when he was acting the role, I felt like it was him. And so I felt like he felt the pain of like his brother leaving, like him having to play this role.
Probably.
He's like, I'm standing in for my brother who can't be here. So it's even more intense. And I'm like doing this thank you tribute and this I love you tribute to my brother. So it like when they played the song, it made it even that much more like, I might have to watch that movie again.
It hit you right in the feels.
Yeah, I might have to watch it again because it really like everything in me was like shaking. Stevie Wonder has a song where he says, "You can feel it all over They can feel it all over people. And he's talking about music and this ability for music to just like go through you and for you to feel it. So I think about when I hear that song, it literally gives me the feels.
Yeah, it definitely does. What did you like about this film?
I mean, my favorite part was of course him bringing back, was them introducing T'Challa, Prince T'Challa specifically.
Prince T'Challa, yeah.
I really like
his dimples and his smile.
Yeah, he was a cute kid. He was a very cute kid. But what I really like in the film is like the integrity and character of the Wakandans.
Keep going.
So I really like that, because when they could have killed the young girl, they didn't. When they could have given her over, they didn't. And so it was just like they were an integrous group of people. And I like that he really painted them in that way that was upstanding. I was kind of curious about why he pinned Mexican against African American or against African.
Yeah.
But I also know that if he's coming from this lens of like being from LA and these two cultures, California kind of beefing, then I mean, it makes sense to me. But that's what I liked about the film. I'm gonna ask you a question. You mentioned something about being like there being strong women, and this role that he put forth, and I know it was a feedback from the first film that he did, Black Panther, was that he painted black women in this really powerful light. Exactly, this really powerful light, and they didn't have to compromise. And even I wasn't sure, but one of the I forget her name, but one of the guard, the general, Okoye, yeah, she takes off her wig and is like, ugh, get this off of me. And so she like wants to be her natural bald head self, right? Yeah. Which you call her a bald head demon in this one. She wanted to be her bald head self. But it was just like, she was very powerful, and they were very powerful. Even his mother being queen, like the father had died, T'Challa had died, and so no other man took the throne. It fell to her being queen. Right. So what do you think about not just in that film in general, but powerful women?
What do I think about powerful women?
Yeah, what is like your...
I'm surrounded by them. I'm surrounded by powerful women. And I think this is an interesting question too, because we inevitably tie in the scripture, right? Many times people default to the scripture that women are to be quiet in church, or they're supposed to submit to their husbands. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we often hear at our church that our pastor has said is, what do you do when the men are absent, or they're not on their post, or something happens with the men and you're left with women? Should they then abandon their home? Right? And even in the scripture, I was listening to somebody today, I think his name is Alan Parr. Not today, a few days ago, Alan Parr. Really great minister and person who like dives deep into the word. And he was saying, in scripture, it talks about how the women are to keep quiet, and if they have questions, go home to their husbands and ask questions. Mm-hmm. And then he responds by saying in that passage, his deduction from that passage is that what's happening there is specific to that church, and the women there were challenging their husbands publicly and causing uproar or whatever, so that it was like now more people are second guessing what the husband of this household was proposing.
Interesting.
And so as a result, you have this thing where it's like, yeah, we're going to look to you as a leader, but wait a minute.
Weren't you just...
Yeah, your wife's over here saying something opposite what you saying.
She was dog walking.
Yeah, basically, it's like, no, we should love each other. Love each other. You up in here, doing whatever. And so now it's like, well, are we to love each other? Because you can't walk it out. So then the response is like, be quiet. Like if you want to question the authority, do it at home. Don't come here and try to exercise or flex your power thinking that you're doing something. And I would argue those would be weaker women because they don't have the power to restrain themselves in a time when it's important.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. And so but he also poses the question, well, what happens if you're not married? Do you never get your questions answered? What happens in an instance where, say that your husband dies, right? Or so many things could be happening. And as these things are happening now, how do I reconcile if the scripture only applies for every woman all over the world every time, right? And And I'm not claiming to be the expert, but that was his interpretation. And so it made me think about it differently, where it's like, okay. So for me, I believe powerful women are necessary, especially when you think about Black communities. Like a lot of the most powerful Black men that we see are supported by very strong Black women. And we don't take away the title of the Black man because of how strong their woman was, right? So I'll give you some examples. When you think about President Barack Obama, his wife Michelle Obama is a very strong woman. When you think about Dr. Martin Luther King, when you think about Coretta Scott King, she's a very, very powerful woman. And just all the things, we don't even know all the behind the scenes that go on, but you get to see their strength, you know, and so it's important.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about when you talk about this idea of a powerful woman, I think we should define what you think, or what we think really powerful woman is, because a lot of times Black women specifically, we get this
bad rap,
or the feedback that we're being aggressive women, when to some of us in our cultures and our family upbringings, that looks like being a strong, powerful woman. And so how does strong, powerful woman in my culture translate to aggressive? You know, not talking about, because I've been called aggressive, and I've been called aggressive from Black men. So not necessarily even dealing with like white society, leave them out of the equation, the conversation for a moment. But Black to Black, sometimes strong Black women get called aggressive within our culture.
Sure.
And what do you think that comes from? If what you're saying is behind every strong Black man is a strong Black woman, if we like rah 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 and we get excited for that, then why is that not really the case? And why is that not walked out? You know,
sometimes I think there are. You're asking two questions, to define it and also to explain this aspect of it.
Yeah.
If I had to attempt to explain it, because I'm sure there are so many things that you can deconstruct with it. Sometimes women who grow up watching other women be powerful don't learn the softer side. And so that's all they know. And so I think what makes a woman powerful is knowing when to be powerful and knowing when to sit back.
I like that.
And so one of the things that we can, even if we're still looking at this movie, is that it's interesting when the king or when someone of authority comes in, they're not trying to flex their power.
Right.
They know how to sit back and chill. And they know how to submit, right? And so then it's like, oh, wow, like there's still order in this place. So every time T'Challa came in the first film, everyone folded their arms, right? Yeah. Everyone stopped whatever they were doing and just stood at attention. And then when it was like, I need you to go over here and do this, it was like, yes, general. Yes, my king. Yes, whatever. So it was never a thing of like, oh no, I always got to defend and fight for myself, because, and that's the other thing too, is I think that there's a difference in being strong and trying to, being powerful and then trying to show yourself as being strong. Like, no, I got to fight. And that's oftentimes it's from a defensive place more than it's from a place of, I know who I am. And which is another thing, I'm going to jump to this film and then I want to hear some feedback from you. It's just the question of, who are you? Right. And so, and I forget what it is in Nosa, I think it's how you say it. But that the question is like, my name is so-and-so, I am the son of so-and-so. And so then it's like, right, something like that. And it's like, when you hear that, it's powerful. I was like, I'm going to teach my son to be able to respond in that manner, just because it's like, to be able to say who you are and who your parent is, or the person who came before you is, or who raised you is, it's powerful because it's like, I'm coming from a place. So I don't have to defend myself because my name already holds weight. And I think a lot of times when you have women who are like, man, you're so aggressive, sometimes, I'm not saying the person calling them that is right every time, but there are often times where it's coming from a place of defensiveness that they're speaking out.
Yeah.
And so it causes it to seem like strength that's not warranted or not needed at the moment.
Yeah, I like what you're talking about. In just that her strength really comes from her knowing when and where to use her power, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't think I've mastered that just yet. I try to swing my power everywhere. It's like one of those, little sprinkler system that just like all over the place.
Yeah.
And I think as I get older, I have started to learn more of that ability. And I think it is an art, really. It's an art to it.
Yeah.
Because you really border the line being a woman. You either can be too soft and you're just kind of like a pushover, or you can be too strong or aggressive, as some say, and you can be like, I'm not taking any of this, and I'm going to do aggressive things to you if you cross me. And so there's really a fine line that we walk, being in that middle, where it's like, I know when to hold them and I know when to fold them. And that's what I really like about this film, is that the women in this film, like, even
their parts are written so well.
They are, and to give dignity to them being fully strong and being fully gentle. Like, I even like how Nakia didn't share right away that she had a son. And she like reserved that for a special time. And then when the special time came, she, announced it and had that moment.
Why do you like it?
Why do I like
that she did that?
What
does that communicate for you?
So I think it's the idea of knowing when to hold them, knowing when to fold them. Because she could have said, "Hey, I have the son, and I have the
future king,
the future king, and I have all these things," and she could have wielded that power all over the place. But I think the environment was a safe place for her not to have to do that, number one. But then two, I think that like the idea of knowing who she is and knowing who she was to him was important, because they never married. So it wasn't like...
No, I think they did.
I don't know. In the movie, I don't think they married.
They mentioned it in some way, shape, or form that it was like a secret ceremony.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, I don't think they married, so she really didn't have any like rights in that type of way. But
one of the things she also says too is she didn't want him to grow up with the pressure of the throne,
right?
Which I think speaks to your point too, of this idea that, like, no, I'm more in pursuit of the power than I am in just being able to raise him, and just being able to let him have an experience as a young boy before he takes on the weight of this world. And so I think there's something powerful about that, as you're pointing out too, with Nakia. And she holds it the entire film. Like, she doesn't slip up. She doesn't like say, "Oh, Siri's losing her mind. Let me tell her she has something to lose. Your nephew needs you." And it's like, what? Like it didn't just come out of nowhere where it was like, yeah, now I'm in control of this thing.
You saw her in many different lights. She was one rescuing Shuri, and then she was, grieving the loss of T'Challa with his mom and having that moment. And
in a different way, because that's her baby daddy, her husband, her significant other, right? And you pointed this out earlier, actually. There's a scene there where she's like, "He was my everything." Can you talk about that a little bit?
I don't know where you're going with it. You got to tell me.
Oh, just that she, when I first saw that scene, I was like, that's interesting, like, to say it that way. And then I think that was the point that you predicted she had a child, because it was like he meant more to her than like my king or my really close friend or, the person who I didn't have to be a spy around. I could just be myself around, right? Like, but you perceived more in that line than I did when I first heard it. But okay. But speaking of this last power thing, there's one more example I wanted to give in this. It was interesting that the queen, Shuri's mother, whose name I'm forgetting right now, forgetting her name.
They just called her Queen Mother.
When she passes away, they say her name, but when the queen is asking for help from
Namor?
Not Namor. When she's asking for help, she gets counsel from the guy who calls her "you bald-headed demon."
Oh, Jabari.
The Jabari tribe, but he's the head of the Jabari tribe, and I forget his name right now. But essentially, like, it's interesting too, and that's one of the ways that I would say, like, the difference between women who are portrayed powerfully versus M'Baku, or portrayed powerfully versus women who have to flex their power. And she wasn't afraid to ask for counsel or help from him.
Right.
And so that was another moment where it was like, okay, wow, this isn't a power hungry now woman tribe and they just want to get rid of men, because he had a very strong voice, right? Like he was the reason why she didn't just give up the girl.
Right.
One of the main people, because he's like, well, if we help him with this, what's the thing that's going to make them not want to continue to ask for more help or demand more things? We need to take a stand now so that we're not caught up in a situation later. And so they do a very good job, I think, of having this balance, if you will. And then it's also powerful to see, just like all of the other micro things going on. Like I said, I think the Queen did a really good job. This is why she got her Golden Globe. Like she got it.
Angela Bassett deserves it.
Shout out to her, because she really came through and did her thing. And I thought it was around the part where she was like, I gave my everything, you know, my husband, my king, you know, all these things. And so it honestly, and I want to ask you from a therapist perspective, a few things. Do you think they mourned well? What do you think of the mourning scene? And just this fight and this dichotomy that the sister has where she doesn't want to mourn. And so the movie kind of edges on because she doesn't properly mourn.
I wouldn't say she doesn't properly mourn.
Okay, go ahead. Talk about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say she didn't properly mourn. I think grief looks different. Of course, we know that.
We don't. Tell me about, what do you mean grief looks different?
I say we know that because I think mental health is becoming like hot topic-ish. Yeah. Like mainstream. So the buzzwords from our profession are being used, green gaslighting and all these other terms are being used and kind of thrown around here and there. And I think one of the more common ones also is that everybody grieves differently.
Yeah.
And so what I mean by that is somebody might sit in the house crying all day. Somebody else might use that grief to catapult them into success or, you know, something career-wise. Some other, you know, may use it to start addictions. Like people do different things when they hurt.
Yeah.
And so I think her grieving was like taking her on a journey because she was experiencing grief. And so it was taking her on a journey. And I think ultimately her grief led her to take care of her people. And almost come to terms with even the hate that she felt with her cousin and her identity and his identity and all of these. So I think the whole story was kind of her on this path to letting go. And even when she's on the beach, at the end of the movie, I think it was her kind of going through that stage of like, okay, I have to kind of release this and let this go, but I'm remembering the good times and I'm thinking about these things. And so she gave up being with her people and addressing her people to get that time away for herself. And so I think she had a good balance of like, I just fought for these people.
Yeah.
Mbaku can take care of it. I'm going to go here and just release and get my like peace of mind for a second.
Yeah.
So I think she was on that journey. And I think, you know, if the story was to continue, we would see her work that out with her nephew and her sister-in-law. Yeah,
it's interesting what you're saying about grief and that. Sometimes, you know how in our families we can do this thing where like, sometimes we can do this thing in our families where quietly, we don't ever say it to the person, but we're like, oh, that's because they're grieving. You know, oh, that's because this is going on or that's going on. And so as a result, like but it may not be the case. Like, and usually it's around the bad things.
What are you talking about?
Like sometimes it's like, oh, I have a brother on drugs. I have a sibling on whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's because ever since we lost Pa, it's just never been the same, which could be true. But I don't know that we often attribute the success pursuit to grief. Well, I'll speak for myself. I don't know that I perceive that to be the case. So that's new to me. And it's interesting to hear it in that way, that when you're pursuing even a success, that could be a grief response. But the more I think about it, it does make sense, because when you hear people like, what motivated you to get into this, or what happened with this? And it's like a family member, my dad, my mom, somebody always had me looking at or playing with this thing. And so now I'm into this thing. Or, so that can make sense. And that grief point is very interesting.
Yeah, and you had a second question for me.
The second question that I wanted to know around from a therapeutic lens is, I was curious, one about how they mourned and if it was proper grieving and all those things. And then just as another piece, it was interesting and curious how the leader of I'm forgetting the name of the people with the Talcan people, mm-hmm. just his whole thing, mm-hmm. right? I think it's interesting that he's kind of been chilling all this time, and I guess what motivates him is this device that can find them. So now he's like, I need to protect my people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was interesting because from your perspective, there's a moment where it seems like Shuri's going to break through to him, where they're sitting alone by themselves, and mm-hmm. she's like, as the princess of Wakanda, I can't let this happen, mm-hmm. And so I don't want to allow it to happen. And his response is like, you don't have a choice, right? Either we're going to kill the girl, mm-hmm. or you're going to help us go to war with everybody else.
Yeah.
And so, I'm wondering, one, how long does it take for people to get over things? Because it seems like he's carrying this from when he was a kid. Mm-hmm. All right. And if you think about our society at large, sometimes I think black people can be so caught up in it's the man's fault. It's, these things that we hold on to. Does this make sense? Maybe I'm talking like vague and hard to hear. And so, now how long? Going a bit long. Yeah. Now how long does it take to get over it?
Where you're going with
how could he have healed differently?
How could he have healed differently?
Yeah. But also that might not be the right way to ask the question, but that's the way it's coming out. Yeah.
How could the guy have healed differently?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that.
Maybe there's not one size fits all, but
yeah, I'm not sure there's one size fits all, because again, he wasn't ever in the movie. It talks about how he didn't ever see the land people. Like, he never saw them. His mom had him in the water, and he lived there, so he never got to see what was happening outside of it. So when he saw what was happening outside of it, it was almost like a shock or traumatic experience for him.
Yeah,
and so he saw them in one type of way. So I'm not sure he could have healed differently, because before that time, I don't think he was
exposed to that world.
But it wasn't also, he wasn't, how do I say, before that time, he wasn't bent on destroying the world. He was just living underwater with his family.
Yeah.
It wasn't until he came up and saw what he saw, and the guy called him the son of the devil, that whole situation that happened, or a child without love.
Yes, child without love.
That he said,
which Namor is no amor, which is no love.
No love.
So
it
wasn't El Niño Namor.
So it wasn't until then that he saw that he said, fine, that's
the name I'm going to take on.
Mm-hmm, he took on that name.
Okay, so here goes another question for you. It seems powerful what happens when you take on an identity ascribed to you. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I'll talk about it in our next episode.
Let's do it.
Well, what Shakespeare said, what is in a name? What is in a name? We're going to talk about it on our next episode. Thank you guys for checking us out. You have any final words you want to say? That's a good way to end.
No, man. What is I love you guys. Now you got me like, dang, where is this going to go? So stay tuned.
It's going to go. Because it makes me think about like Jacob and...
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
All the names.
The name that you take on, how does it inform your identity?
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Or not even the name that you were born with. Hold on. I'm trying to end
Come on.
Not even the name that you were born with, but the name that you allow people to call you.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Okay. Well, check us out next time when we're going to talk about what is in a name. All right. Y'all have a good evening. We love you.
See.